also excited that you're here this morning because what we're doing is we're wrapping up this series that we've been calling I Want to Believe But. And if you've been here for any of the sermons in this series, you already know a little bit about what this series is about. You know, you've kind of been tracking along with us and following us as we've kind of been going through this series as we talk about just the times in life where we sometimes deal with doubt, right? And we've all been there before. And if you haven't been there before, you probably will. And there are these seasons of life, these storms of life that we sometimes go through doubt. We sometimes have, if we're being honest, right, we sometimes have more questions about God or to God than we do answers. And there are times where we just kind of go through these things. And it could be all kinds of reasons, as we've discussed throughout this series. It could be that we're going through these moments of dealing with grief. It could be moments that we're dealing with pain. It could be moments where we're dealing with uncertainty or some type of heartache in life. It could be worry and anxieties in life. And we don't know why. We don't always say this out loud, but we don't know why God is allowing something, right? God, why are you allowing this in my life? God, why are you not doing something? God, why aren't you answering my prayers? Just like you saw in the video there. There are times where, and I wouldn't ask you to raise your hand to this, but I bet we'd all agree. There are times where we've said prayers and we're thinking to ourselves, God, why aren't you answering those prayers? And I've prayed to you multiple times. I've prayed to you all through the night at times. I've prayed to you at different moments in my life about the same thing. And God, why aren't you doing the things that I think that you should? Or we could even say it like this, at least God, why aren't you doing the things that I hope that you would? And we say this phrase a lot. I believe, but. I believe, but I struggle with my belief. That's been kind of our agreement in this series, that we've all kind of said that from time to time. I believe, but things are complicated in my life. I believe, but I don't always understand, God, what you're doing. I believe, but, or at least I used to believe when I was younger, and now that I'm older and things have gotten more messy in my life, more complicated, I struggle with believing. I believe, but my husband doesn't believe. I believe, but my wife doesn't believe. I believe, but my kids, they don't believe. They did believe, but now they don't. I believe, but a lot of my friends in my circle of influence, they don't believe. I believe, but when it comes to going to church, that's really a struggle for me. Well, I believe, but when it comes to reading my Bible, I can't really get into it. I believe, but just like we're talking about this morning with prayer, I just struggle at praying. I believe, but whenever I pray, I feel like my prayers go unanswered or go unheard. I believe, but God, I just don't know how you fit into my life right now. We say those kinds of things. We think those kinds of things. I believe, but God, I just don't know if I can trust you. I believe, but I just have questions. I have doubts. So that's what the series has been all about. Whether we're struggling with our faith or it's what we would call the season of doubt, we sometimes find ourselves in what we would say is very desperate situations. So sort of like the dad we've been talking about here in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, which it's kind of been our main scripture throughout this series. And we're going to look at it one more time this morning. But it's this moment where this father, he has this conversation with Jesus. And it's a very honest conversation. It's very, he's just being very transparent in this moment. And it's probably what this dad would say is in the midst of one of the most difficult seasons of his life. In fact, what we learn is he's been dealing with this most of his son's life, and it's almost killed him several times. We don't know exactly how old his son is, but it was a situation that was both physical as well as spiritual in nature. On the one side, his son would have these terrible seizures, and on the other side, he was dealing with these evil spirits, and all of it led to him almost dying several times. And so in this desperate situation, this very desperate parent, he's looking for Jesus, and he's looking for some answers. We all have these questions at times. He's looking for some answers from Jesus. He's looking for Jesus to do something. He's looking for Jesus to do. Here's what I would say. He's looking for Jesus to do what only Jesus could do. And so if you got your Bible, you can look there at Mark chapter 9, verse 17. We're going to actually read a big portion of this together. We haven't read a big portion of this yet, so we're going to read this all together in one time, okay? And so it kind of gives you a good picture of what it is that he's saying, what happens here, as well as kind of what we're talking about this morning, okay? If you didn't bring a Bible, that's okay. It'll be on the wall behind me. And I want to start in verse 17, okay? So look there. It says, a man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of his speech. And whenever it seizes him," he says, "it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth and gnashes his teeth and becomes rigid." He says, "I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." So Jesus, he answers, he says, "You unbelieving generation. How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy," he says, "to me." And so they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion, and he fell to the ground, and he rolled around foaming at the mouth, just like the father had said he had done so many times. And Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into a fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything," and that's the phrase that we can relate to right there, because he's in his transparency and his vulnerability, he's crying out to Jesus. He says, "But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." And Jesus is like, if you can. What do you mean if you can? Everything is possible for the one who believes. And immediately the boy's father explained, "I do believe. Help me overcome my belief." And that's the one we can wrap our arms around, because that's us sometimes, is that we find ourselves in this situation, right? At different times in life, at different things we're going through in life, where we say, "I do believe, God, but I just need help. Help me overcome my unbelief." This is when Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene. He rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." And in a very supernatural moment, the spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. And the boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But look at verse 27. It says, Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. And after Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples had asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" And he replied, "This kind can come out only by prayer." Now, some of the manuscripts, in fact, some of your translations, if you're reading this on your own Bible, it may say prayer and fasting. And that, what Jesus is really trying to do is explain to the disciples that what they needed to do wasn't just believe, right? It wasn't just about believing, but they also needed to pray and to actually seek God through their prayer, through their praise, through their worship. And the emphasis here for us, I think, is one and the same. And it's what I want to talk to you a little bit about this morning, is this idea that Jesus is making the point, that he's saying to us this, that in the midst of whatever it is that is up against you, whatever it is that is your obstacle, that's standing in your way, whatever storm, whatever season of life that you're facing, do not underestimate, and many of you already know this to be true, do not underestimate the importance, and for that matter, the power of prayer and worship. Don't underestimate the power, the importance of prayer and worship, especially, and this is the caveat, especially when it comes to difficult and what we would say are some of the more desperate situations of life. Sometimes what is required, and sometimes what is needed of us, is to simply spend time in prayer. It's to simply spend time praising God through whatever storm, through whatever season that it is that we're going through. And I say storms because storms and seasons, I think, are a little bit different in some of these regards. because that's kind of how life is. There are storms in life. There are what we would call seasons of life. Sometimes it's a storm, and what storms are like in our life is there are things that could come onto us all at once, right? It could come in your life, it could come in your family's life, and these things could come when you least expect it. And we know that storms, we just experienced a storm this last week. We don't have many of them here in San Diego, but we actually got some thunder, some lightning, some rain, some wind. I mean, we actually had a storm, right? And storms, they can come all at once. They can come when you're least expecting it. They can be different sizes, right? They can be, very, very large storms, smaller storms. Sometimes they can start out really easily, and then they can turn violent. Other times they can be ferocious right out of the gate. So it's sort of like a tornado. Some of you grew up where I grew up, in places in the Midwest or the South. And they actually had, I read this last week, a tornado warning for places in Southern California, of all places. But no matter what we learn about storms in life is that the aftermath of the storm, they can be seen, it can be felt for a long time, and it can literally change your life forever. And some of you that have gone through storms, you know this. Because whatever the storm was, it changed your life. Storms, they can be a lot of different things in our lives. It could be that you or your spouse, one of you lose your job. The source of income that you have, it's cut in half, or maybe it withers altogether. It's not only your livelihood that's at stake. There are times where we struggle financially to the point that we may be in jeopardy of losing things, our house, our vehicles, whatever. Could be a relationship, could be a marriage. And once everything was happy, everything was good, you would say that the marriage, that the relationship, it was a very healthy thing. But then all of a sudden things happened and things turned sour and things got ugly and you broke up or maybe you became separated or maybe you're going through a very difficult divorce. Maybe the storm in your life was kind of like a health scare of some kind. It happened to you, it happened to somebody in your family. Could have been a sickness, could have been something else. And you used to hate going to the doctor, right? You used to hate going to the hospital, but now you find yourself there all the time. Whether it was a one-time event like a heart attack or maybe a stroke that you've gone through, or whether it's ongoing treatments to battle something like a diagnosis of cancer. Storms like this. And what Jesus is reminding us is simply this, that whatever the storm in your life, what is needed at many times, if not perhaps all the time, is prayer and even worship. It's this idea of trusting God through the storm, right? In the middle of the storm, whatever it is in your life, no matter how vicious, no matter how violent, no matter how long it lasts. Prayer is our way of leaning in to God. It's leaning into God perhaps when we need Him the most. And it's one thing, this is what I know to be true. It's one thing for me to say that, as a pastor. It's one thing for you to hear it from my perspective. But it's a whole other thing to actually hear it from someone who has actually recently gone through a storm or currently is in the middle of walking through one. And so, as a church, we have a number of different families that are going through various kinds of storms, small, large, any different number of storms. But as I was preparing this morning, I got to thinking about one family, and I called her up and texted her and talked to her and asked her if she would be willing to come and to share a little bit about their situation, give a little bit of their testimony of what God was doing and has done in their life. And so I thought about the Lively family, and so here in just a moment, I'm going to have Kristen actually come up and share a little bit of their testimony with you this morning about the storm that they have walked through or are still coming out of. and to just hear what God has done in the midst of this storm that they've gone through. But before we get there, I actually have a video, and it's a video that was created for them from the neuroblastoma, I don't know what's it called, agency or something like that, but it helps raise money to fight this deadly disease that affects so many different kids. And so they created this video. It's a beautiful video. I want you to watch it here. And then
When they first went in to test his bone marrow, they couldn't get any aspirate, which is the liquid in the bone marrow, and the doctor told us that his bone marrow is probably full of neuroblastoma, and so we were just devastated. But they did the scan and he didn't, and the biopsy, and it wasn't in his bone marrow, which we consider a miracle. I mean, this whole process we've been clinging to our faith and praying and trusting that God will get him through it. Joshy is amazing. Like, he is a resilient, tough little kid, and he's smiling all the time. When you're here in the hospital and, seeing Joshy, like, it's sad that his circumstance, but he's not sad. Like, he's happy, and it's inspiring how tough kids are, how positive they can be despite what they're going through. I feel like we've been in the hospital more than out of the hospital since he got diagnosed. Like, originally I thought, we'll just go in for chemo and we'll be home a few weeks, go in for chemo a week, be home for a few weeks, but we've actually been in the hospital between every chemo round except for one. And then we've been here for stem cell for almost 4 weeks. So Joshy actually thinks it's kind of fun. Like, we walk in, he's like, Mommy's turn, Daddy's turn. So I think it keeps it interesting for him. When you feel your child going through something, your love gets so deep for that child, and then for your other children who are going through it also. I've learned to be in the present more and just be there, with my kids and having joy every day and, trying to be positive. Yeah, I think a lot of it's like realizing that I want to make more memories with my kids. He had surgery, and then he had one more round of high-dose chemo, and then they scanned him after that, and it was clear. I mean, it was no evidence of disease already, so we honestly couldn't ask for a better outcome at this point, but I also know there should be better ways to treat this disease than what he's been exposed to, because there's definitely a lot of risks. And of course, like, when he got diagnosed, everyone wants to help. What can we do to help? What do you need? Do you need to come out there and watch your kids? And honestly, as a parent, like, the only thing that can help is knowing that your child's gonna make it. And the only way he's gonna make it is if there's good treatment. And so right away I was like, we need to give to research. So people who said, what can I do? We made Joshy a page on the BNB website, and I told them to donate to research because there needed to be better outcomes than 50 to 60%. So that's why right away I was drawn to, wanting to make sure there was better treatments, because I figured that's the only way to save him.
Isn't it awesome? Such a good job, man. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know there are other stories that you could share of times of going through storms, going through seasons. The storm may last only through the night, but some things last for a lifetime even. And I know that there are some seasons that folks have gone through that you've been praying for very many years. I was reminded that in the Bible, there are different examples of people that they continue to pray, not just for weeks, not just for months, but for years. Joseph, for example. Joseph, he had a dream that didn't come true for 17 years. Think about that. You think about Hannah and Sarah in the Bible, that she prayed most of her life to be able to have a baby, and it wasn't until she was almost 80. The children of Israel, They cried out to God for 423 years for a deliverer before Jesus came. You see, sometimes God takes us through these seasons, and it doesn't always happen the way we want or the way we hope, but if we trust in God, if we lean in God, then we can expect him to do what only he can do. And I love Christian's testimony. I love their story. I was thinking, man, how in the world are we going to end today's message? How are we going to end this series? And I was thinking about a song to have us sing together. And then I came across this video a couple weeks ago. And it's actually a video that talks about how the song, I Raise a Hallelujah. We've been singing this for a few months as a church. And this video explains where that song came from. And it just fits so perfectly that I thought I have to show it to you. And we're going to actually close out this morning by singing this song together. But first, I want you to watch this video. And hopefully, the next time that we sing it, which is going to be here in just a few moments, it's going to mean even more to you, okay? So check out this last video here before we close. I'm going to ask the worship.
We got the news that he was in extremely serious condition, and it just went from worse to worse.
In about a 12-hour time period, it went from he's just kind of had this little sick thing at home to life or death.
We're in a battle for a child's life and for a family.
I'm a little bit of a nut when it comes to Christmas because I didn't have the lights outside and all of that. We grew up, kind of poor, and so this was a really special Christmas for us. We went out and got our tree, and stockings were hung, and then everything changed.
We love to do train cake every year together as a family, and Jackson and I were actually doing that, just me and him that day. So it was a super fun, mommy son moment, and we were making the cake, and then that evening, just not long after that, he was just laid out on the floor.
I knew he's not okay. He needs to go to the hospital.
And so we rushed him to the ER. He was just so sick, and I could hardly, get him to the hospital. The doctor had called me up, and he said, I'm really concerned that he might have E. coli. When I heard that, I thought, that's 1 in a million chance. I don't feel like that would be possible. And if it is E. coli, that's treatable. And a lot of times E. coli doesn't, it's just a terrible sickness and it passes through the system. But in our case, he contracted HUS, which then developed into kidney failure and to the most severe case of HUS.
The doctor had said that this is basically out of their realm of capabilities, and that we had to go to a different children's hospital. And I was thinking, that's going to be in the next few days. He said, no, you need to go tonight, and you're going to get on a helicopter. We're going to fly him there.
I was just flooded with the sense that I might never know my boy. Growing up to be a man, it might be this week that I lose my son. All of a sudden, his speech starts to slur. He just started not being able to communicate, not being able to respond. In the middle of the night, they rushed us up to the PICU and called a neurosurgeon, and they tested him, and there was no response. There was no pain response. There was no recognition of me. And at that moment, I thought, I'm losing my son. Even if he makes it through this, I don't know if he'll ever know me again. He was just sprawled out on the bed and couldn't respond to anything. He was gone.
There's a time when you've said every prayer you can say, and you don't have the strength to praise and worship anymore. And you haven't slept for weeks. And you're just kind of undone. And that was a moment for me when I was undone. the flip side of that is I feel like that was the moment that I really began to feel the prayers around the world.
Hi, it's Christmas morning, and a lot of you are asking how Jackson's doing, and just want to say thanks for all your prayers and support. It's been overwhelming. It's a really long story, but it's really complicated right now, and we really need a Christmas miracle. They can't get to his blood.
There was something supernatural that happened that brought the church together. I would pull up social media and I would just read people's prayers and the comments of people all over the world. I've never met them before, but they were just crying out for my son. We were in the brink of life or death, and people would be posting comments on our Facebook. We are up praying for you.
People posting by the thousands, commenting, and they'd be all over the world. We're in Brazil, my church, whole church is praying for you. I'm in Russia, my little children pray for your son every day. I didn't have any prayers left to say, but I could feel and see and hear the prayers being said on my behalf.
Yeah, this is a box full of letters and something that we've really treasured.
This is the bed that Jackson is laying on. And Jesus is healing him. They're in the middle of the world.
Well,
Jesus, from Mercy, 4 years old.
hooked up to everything. They allowed me just to hold him in my arms, and you could just see the light still in his eyes. And I just remember just standing and declaring over him he was gonna raise up out of that grave, and he was gonna live.
We'd get good news and then worse news. Because it was so up and down, and so we go to the hospital and they thought he'd be okay, so they sent us home. And then to find out that he's worse than you even thought the first time. And then you're at the hospital and you're thinking, he's gonna get better. And then you find yourself on a helicopter. And then you find yourself in a
head of the PICU came in and said, we have to get a central line in tonight. They couldn't give him another sedative, so it would be like going in, basically having surgery on a child without any anesthesia.
And the doctor took us aside and put us in another room.
They took us in a room and explained we had to have this procedure done or we would lose him, but there was so many risks to having the procedure done.
I remember the night we got the text that they didn't think he was going to make it through the night.
When you got the text, you just collapsed into my arms and just began to weep. And I could just feel like we're going to lose. We're going to lose, Jackson. We're not going to win this one. There's not going to be victory on this battlefield.
Those moments, even though they're really hard, something within us rises up that only moments of trauma and intensity can actually call forth. In those moments for us, the only option is we just have to worship.
I remember standing at this crossroads and this giant of unbelief standing in front of me. It's your prayers don't matter. All these prayers don't matter. The Lord's not going to hear it. This is going to be like the other moments where you prayed with all your heart and then you buried your friend the next week. But there was something inside of me of no, and the melody just erupted out of my heart that I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies.
He sent me a song, and I don't know to what extent, but he said their community had prayed for Jackson, and in a spontaneous moment, they came up with a song, and so they just recorded it and sent it to me. I took that song over my phone and I played it over my son over and over again. I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was fighting warfare, and it wasn't just me. I wasn't alone. I had people literally making weapons, writing songs, and sending it to us. It still humbles me and baffles me the power of global prayer, the power of community, the power of believing together.
He started talking again.
What did you just paint a picture of?
You know, you could tell it was still like fragile, it was still coming back, but he was talking again, and that was like amazing. He was asking in the cutest 2-year-old voice, like everything you can imagine that he liked, you know, I want a hamburger, you know, but we were so happy to hear him talking again.
From talking with Joel, the tone started to feel like, oh wow, we're coming out of this, I think.
Just the shift internally of like we made it was incredible. We walked in to the hospital just before Christmas, and now we're sitting here with a healthy son taking his nap right now.
Hey, buddy. Look, we're going home. Look, you haven't been outside for a month.
I remember hearing the news that Jackson is coming home, and it was like Christmas.
We believe in the power of praise. We've seen God do a lot. And I don't know the secret to all of it, but I do know that Jackson is well today. And I can't help but wonder or think that that praise had a part of that.
This is part of our story now, and it's part of Jackson's testimony of his life, that the world will know that miracles happen.
This gospel is not haphazard. It's not a Russian roulette. It's not a guessing game. It is the absolute nature of God revealed through his goodness and his kindness. And what is necessary is for the people of God to rise to the occasion, to face the impossibilities of life with the confidence of God's character, his nature, and his promise. There's no other option. We were called to this. This is our responsibility. It is our privilege.